What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut, and welcome to episode 9 of Lawns Across America. So welcome to the final week of March 2019. The lawn care season is really starting to kick in. I know I say that every week, but it's kind of how it works. This week and last week happened to be the biggest spring break weeks down here in Florida. I'm sorry for those of you that came down 2 weeks ago when we had a lot of gray skies, but today, right now, if you are here in Florida, especially on the West Coast, I think it's like yesterday was like high 80s from what I could tell. Today is definitely in the 80s. It's a little bit more mild, super bright sunshine. Today is a beautiful day here in sunny Southwest Florida. But for the rest of you, I know that you're starting to wake up where you're at. Most of you now are getting out and you're able to see your lawns. We're going to have a question today from Bangor, Maine. That's a little bit of an extreme, but we're also going to have questions way down here in Florida. I'm going to span the gamut this week, but I wanted to talk to those of you I'm going to talk to those of you that are in those areas that you have cool season turf, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial rye, fescue, turf type tall fescue. I want to talk to you folks, those of you that your season is just starting to kick off. Now, I realize, again, my friends in the South and out West, we're going to talk about warm season grass here in this podcast, but for right now, I do want to talk to those of you that you're coming out of dormancy, because a lot of you are starting to look that way. Soil temperatures are starting to come up. I was actually in Milwaukee this last week, and when I was there, I was able to get out and look at some lawns. If you haven't seen the video, please go to the Lawn Care Nut channel and check that video out, again, where I was able to look at some lawns coming out of dormancy. And that kind of brings me to what I want to talk about here early in the spring for most of you. I know that a lot of you are ready to get started. You want to get something going, and we're going to talk about some things that you can do early from one of our questions here. But the first thing I wanted you to do, and this goes for everybody, is be observant. The year is still early. Even if you're down here in Florida, the year is early, and we're going to talk about some take-all patch that we think we might be seeing here in some St. Augustine lawns throughout Florida and South Texas. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But for the most part, all of you are still early in the season. Even if you're in Georgia and you have Bermuda, you are still not in your full swing yet. You're not even close. In fact, a lot of you are just probably starting to green up if you're in certain parts of Georgia and you have Bermuda grass, even up into Tennessee. So you're getting there, but you're not there yet. Obviously, if you're further north, you've just been able to see your lawn for the first time in a week or so. But the idea being, use this early time to be observant. There is nothing that is too late for any of you, no matter where you're at. It is not too late for this season. Some of you have more time than others, but it's not too late. And I want you to be observant. Get out right now, because the days are only going to get longer. You're only going to get more sunlight from here on out, which is a positive thing for lawns. So take a look at what things look like right now. Where is the sun shining in the morning when you get out? Go out, get your morning paper if you still do that. Have a cup of coffee. Take a walk around the lawn and look at what it looks like early in the morning. Where is the sun shining? Then when you get home from work, take that same walk and observe it there. Where is the sun shining now? Where is the house blocking versus not blocking? What trees were blocking the sun this morning that are not blocking the sun now? Where am I parking my car? And did the car block sun in a certain part of the driveway where also people happen to walk a lot? These are types of observations that you can make early, especially as the lawn wakes up, and you can make those observations in light of the time of year it is and some of the things that are happening, because your lawn is greening up, but maybe the areas where a lot of people are walking and where your car shades the sun part of the day, maybe those areas are waking up slower. Or maybe areas that are, as in one case we're going to talk about a drain field or a septic system, maybe those areas are waking up differently than other areas of the lawn, or areas where the sun is blocked by trees or by your kid's play set or by the house. These are the types of things I want you to look at. Now, for those of you guys that are up north that are just seeing your lawn for the first time in the last week or two, this is an interesting concept that I want to explore a little bit, because I think it could have something to do with some of the results that some of y'all are getting. And it comes to trees. As I've mentioned previously and in other dissertations, I guess we can call them, is that trees are a natural enemy to the lawn. That doesn't mean that we need to cut trees down. It just means we need to realize that there are certain competition to the lawn. Dogs and pets, even people, too much people walking on a lawn can be an enemy to the lawn. Obviously, anything that shades it out or takes away sunlight, anything that takes away water, nutrients, or space in the soil we would consider that an enemy to the lawn for sure, as well as diseases, insects that damage the lawn. Those are also enemies. So there's a lot of things that are the lawn is struggling against, and one of those is trees. But if you think about it, when you're up north, right now there are no trees, there are no leaves on the trees. And I was thinking about that. Trees are kind of a vindictive adversary to the lawn, right? Because this time of year they're laying back. They're like, you know what? We're not gonna do too much right now. We're gonna let our sap run early. Things are gonna run up and down the trees, xylem and phloem, mostly xylem, I think. Either way, something's gonna run inside, but there's no leaves yet, so there's no photosynthesis. But things are starting to move inside the tree. But it says, you know what? I'm not gonna leaf out quite yet. I'm gonna wait till the days are a little longer. I get a little more sunlight because I got much more mass to support. I need to get a lot more photosynthesis going, so I'm going to slow back. But the lawn, the grass, will start coming out of dormancy or out of winter much quicker and will green up while there's still no leaves on the trees. And you'll see this, just obviously go around. This is part of being observant of the general things that are going on around you, because I'm telling you, just being observant of trees, shrubs, plants, living things around you, even the animals around you, birds, obviously. We have a lot of lizards here. Being observant of those things, what they're doing during different times of year, where they're at, where they're getting sun, where they're not, where they're getting water, where they're not. All of these things help you to just be in tune with what's going on in general. And you'll notice, again, that trees do not leaf out, obviously, early. The majority of them don't. So the lawn is then able to get more sunlight. But those trees, I think they like that. I think they look down at that lawn and they go, yeah, you go ahead and soak up all that sun you want to right now, Kentucky bluegrass, because another 3-4 weeks, we're going to blot you right out. We're going to steal everything that you've gained. We're going to take it all away from you. But that's something to consider when you have a lawn, is that a lot of times the grass will come out early in the spring and it'll start to do well, and you'll feel like you're nourishing it along and you're getting it going. And then again, those trees leaf out and they steal sunlight from it, and the lawn will fade, and it'll fade into summer. And that's where we talk about areas under trees that maybe you just call no joy, which means you just decide, I won't be able to grow grass here, and you turn that into a nice shaded garden with some hosta. Love hosta. Or maybe you just leave it as mulch or rock or whatever you need to do to realize that you're not going to be able to grow grass there. And that's one of the things that you want to watch. See, grass will seek its own level. This works in cool season, but especially in warm season grass, but it works in cool season grass too. Grass will seek its own level. In other words, it might come in strong in the spring, but by the end of summer, where you see the grass still growing and still healthy under those trees, that's where it's kind of sought its final level or its own level. And that might be where you want to mark down that you realize, okay, even though in the spring under these trees I can have some grass, it fades during the summer and the fall because it gets blotted out from sunlight. So you let it seek its own level, and that's where you decide then that you're going to make the edges of your border for your hostage garden, your shade garden, or you put in other shrubs or whatever you're going to put in. I was looking at Jake the Lawn Kid's recent video he did, because he went out to our project lawn to check it out, because we're going to be there doing our first application soon. And you can see along the wood line, along the edges where there wasn't a lot of grass growing. I'm going to watch that this spring and see if some does grow. But you watch as the year goes on, anything along the woods will get shaded out eventually. Right now, the woods are wide open. This house on our project lawn is literally in the middle of the woods. They cut a section out of the woods and put a house there. It's beautiful. But as those woods fill in, you're going to see that the lawn will shrink in and away from those woods. And that's what I mean by the lawn seeking its own level. And to kind of put a bow on this, you can be observant of such things in your lawn, even if it's on a micro level. Even if you have one small little crabapple tree on the corner of your house that barely sticks out, but during the year underneath or beside or next to that crabapple, you've always got trouble with the lawn. Is it happening in the summer when the crabapple may be also losing leaves to apple scab fungus and covering some things up? I don't know, but be observant of these small areas in your own yard so you know. So that way when you do get a problem that comes up, you don't automatically think it's bugs or grubs or fungus or disease and try to treat it with a chemical. You understand the lay of your land. You understand how it is affected during different parts of the year and how other living things around it or the house, dead things, might also affect it. The idea is to be observant. Now, the other thing I do want to say is get those leaves up. Those trees, that's your other evil little thing that they do, is they drop leaves. and those leaves literally blot out the sun. This time of year when the days are still shorter, they're longer now than they were 2-3 weeks ago, obviously, but they're not as long as they could be yet. And we want to let that grass get all the sun that it can. Even though some of those trees are going to leaf out and block it, we want it to be able to get all the sun we can, and we want to get those leaves off the ground. I know you cleaned up last fall, but it doesn't matter. There are always leaves that end up there after the winter because stuff just blows around. It's just the way the world works. Get that stuff off there. Get that out of there real quick. So that was kind of the idea today, is to just be a little bit observant of not only your lawn, but other lawns around you. Be observant of spots in your lawn. Be observant of where the trees are now versus where they'll be later. All of those things, that's going to really help you. And all of that is free. That doesn't cost anything. That's not about whose chemical works better than who else's or whose strategy is better than whose strategy is. Nothing about that. It's about being observant. I'm telling you, if you just do that right there, if you just learn your land, like all the rest of the stuff will be much, much easier. Understand and learn your land. With that, let's get right into today's first question. All right, so for our first question today, we're going up to Pennsylvania. In fact, if you're on my email newsletter, go to thelawncarenut.com. You can pick up my email newsletter. We send that out every Tuesday, and it's just lawn tips. It's usually in a little bit longer form because it's written. I'm able to break into some math there, some detail, things like that. People really like the email, again, because it's written content that you can continually review. And actually, in this week's email, we were doing some calculations for fertilizer with pendimethalin in it, which is a pre-emergent. We're going to talk about that quite a bit today. But also in that, I talked about some areas that are ready for go time. As you guys know, that pre-emergent, I recommend you get your first one down as soil temperatures approach 55 degrees. Not when they hit 55, but as you know, they're approaching 55. So within a couple of weeks of knowing that your historic time to hit 55 degrees in the soil, that's when you want to put that pre-emergent down, as a couple of weeks leading up to that. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was actually my example this week, because right now I can look at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I can see that you guys are going to be historically, I'm using the Greencast tool, I can see that historically April 15th is when Pittsburgh is going to be at like 55 degrees in the soil. Historically, April 15th. Today is March 26th. We are 3 weeks before that? We are actually leading up to that. I would say that right now is the window for Pittsburgh. Get your prodiamine. You can go to thelawncarenut.com and get it. Get it wherever you want. Get your pre-emergent. We'll talk more about pre-emergents. But right now, you're in that window. It's just opened for you. We're leading up to 55. So this one is not out of Pittsburgh. This is close, though. And this is from David. And David says, I live in Millersburg, Pennsylvania, and I have the cool season lawn plan. I have a bag of prodiamine, 16 bags of Milorganite, 2.5 gallons of RGS, and 2.5 gallons of Humic 12. Well, David, you are set, bro. You have all the ammunition you need for the season. He says, I watch and listen to all your content, podcasts and YouTubes, and I've been taking soil temperatures over the last couple of weeks, and during the day I reach close to 50 degrees, but at night they dip into the 40s. When should I start with my first app? This weekend, we should hit close to 55-degree soil temps, but they will dip again at night. So I've kind of already answered the question. I tend to do that. I get on a rampage, and I get going, and I get on a ramble, but that's okay because repetition is the key to learning. So here's the first thing, David. David, your thinking is right. And this is what I always say. This is really what makes me happy about what I do, is when I get a question like this, and it's really somebody that already knows the right answer here. I know he does, and he's just double-checking to validate the strategy. So he knows that he's in that window. That's why he's saying that. He's like, bro, I'm measuring here. I'm seeing some 40s. I'm seeing some 50s. Now, he's talking about nighttime temperatures when he says, I've been taking he is talking about soil temperatures. He says, I've been taking soil temps over the last couple of weeks, and during the day I reach close to 50. So he's right. He's leading up to that. Now, he sent this in, a couple of days ago, but the long and the short of it is, what he's doing is he is taking soil samples from his actual lawn with his soil thermometer, and he's saying, I'm finding some 50s. So the thing that, David, I would want you to do is go to the Greencast tool, Greencast Online, and put in your town there and put in the temperatures. Now listen, guys, you got to go back to 2018 in order to see the historical temperatures. You can't move forward to understand what it's going to be like in April, because April of 2019 hasn't happened yet. So when you're on the Greencast tool and you're on the date toggle, it's going to default to today's date, and it's going to tell you today's soil temperatures, and it's going to tell you today's averages for the last 5 and 10 years. What I want you to do, though, is go back to last year, 2018, and go a little bit ahead of where you are. In this case, in Pennsylvania here, you're going to go to April 15th, and what you're going to find in Millersburg, PA, and definitely in Pittsburgh, PA, is you're going to find that as of April 15th, historically, the 5-year average is like 54, 55 degrees on April 15th. That's soil temp. David has been doing his own readings the last couple weeks, and he's saying, hey, I'm getting some times where I'm here in the 50s, but at night it's obviously in the 40s. So what David is telling me is he sees that he's leading up. If you're getting these temperatures where you're hitting these 50s during the day, and you also know that your historical day of 55 is within 2 to 3 weeks, which is April 15th in this case, you are cleared to throw down. I don't care what you're measuring overall. I don't care what you're measuring at night versus the day. What you know is that you are definitely hitting some temperatures leading up to 55 because he's getting some temperature readings in his lawn with his own soil thermometer of 50. He's getting that actual, and 50 definitely leads to 55, right? And we know that the historical is only 3 weeks away at this case. I would say that the window is close enough and you can throw down. Now, you don't have to throw down right today, and we're going to talk about that sense of urgency kind of deal, but you know you're close. You know you're into it. And that's how I know David is on the right track, because that's what he's telling me. Basically, when he says I'm measuring some 50s, I want to know, is this right? He's basically saying, I think I'm getting close. Alan, can you validate that for me? And yes, David, I'm validating it for you. It's time to go, bro. Anytime between now and the next 3 weeks. Now, if you got to go out of town, you're going to miss that. Okay, then throw down April 20th. April 20th is better than April 29th. If you can't throw down April 20th and you can throw down April 29th, fine, throw down April 29th, because that's better than May 29th. Get something down. You see, get a pre-emergent down sometime in the spring, and you're going to do some good. If you want to be perfect, then you would be anytime between now and April 15th in Pittsburgh, or in this case in Millersburg, which I'm going to assume is close enough by, and you're good to go. So great question this week, David. Your thinking is dead on. You're on the right track. Go ahead and throw her down. Okay, now for our next one, we're actually going to go down and talk to you folks with St. Augustine grass. This is most of you that are coming out of dormancy fairly quickly now. So this is going to be Florida, South Florida for sure, but this is going to be Central Florida up into the Panhandle, and then South Texas, and even into parts of Texas, St. Augustine grass. I'm getting a ton of questions. You guys are sending in questions and you're saying, hey, my St. Augustine grass is yellow, or it's yellowish brown in patches, or I've got brown areas and I have some areas that are greening up and some areas that are not. Should I be concerned? So this is a big one. We're going to tackle this now, and there's a lot to tackle here. There's a lot of possibilities. And so I'm going to try to give you some tools that can help you to just reason through this and understand what it could be, what it couldn't be, what the risks are, what you can do, and what you shouldn't do. But the first thing I want you to do before you do anything with your St. Augustine grass that is looking yellow or yellowish or even tannish or brown, but mostly yellow is what most people are seeing, when you see that coming out of the winter here or into spring now, and remember, for us, this is what we call false spring. We don't really have a real spring here. So this is false spring. But anyway, those of you that are coming out of that, I want you to realize that some of this is okay. It's very normal for sections of the lawn, especially St. Augustine grass, to come out of winter a little bit differently than others. This is the same up north, where we talk about warm zones will green up faster than cool zones. Shaded areas will green up slower than areas in full sun. This is the same thing in St. Augustine grass, except for different things can have happened. Because we don't have any kind of snow cover on our St. Augustine grass, it can still be exposed to many things throughout the winter that can, knock the stolons back, that can damage the roots, it can slow it down. There can even be some disease lingering from the fall brown patch we saw quite a bit of. Some of that could have lingered. So I don't want you to necessarily panic about things. I just want you to always be observant. And that's the thing, because one of the first things you're going to want to know is these brown areas, these struggling areas that you're talking about. How long has it been struggling? Have they been struggling all the way since last summer, last spring? Because I can tell you that I have areas in my lawn that I know right now that they just always struggle in the spring. And I've only been here a couple years, and actually only half of my lawn is still original to when I moved in. But I've got a few areas that I know are going to struggle in the spring. They just did the last 2 years. I don't know necessarily why, but I do know that they struggle. They just come out a little bit slower. So if it's just that, then you know everything is cool. The other thing to do is look at other lawns in your neighborhood. Do you look better or worse? Are there other ones that look the same? Look at the lawns that are treated professionally. What do those look like? Find the DIY, hardcore DIYer in your neighborhood. You know who that person is. What does that person's lawn look like? What does the completely neglected lawn in the neighborhood look like? And assess yourself that way. If you have a lot of the same problems, no matter what across, then it's probably not a problem. It's probably just normal grass greening up, right? But if you're the only one that looks a certain way, okay, then you can kind of take it that way. So that's some other things to do, is to be observant. Now, the next thing you want to do when you're looking at the lawn and you're looking at brown spots, and this goes for any of you, by the way, when you're assessing a brown spot, does it look unnatural? And when I say unnatural is, do you see straight lines, basically? If you see anything that's a straight line, that's typically not nature in a lawn, because the way things flow or tend to move is either with water flow or as they move outward from an area where they started, like rhizot kind of moves outward, but it'll be in round, scalloped looks, like scalloped patches, right? So if you see any kind of lines, then that's something mechanical or something underneath the ground that's affecting it, or something was laying there, or something was dropped. Who knows, right? Something was burned from putting a grill on top of it. I don't know. There's a lot of things that can happen. So if you see straight lines, that's definitely not a disease. That's mechanical. Now, the other thing is it in patches, or is the entire lawn this color? If it is not the entire lawn, then what is the difference in the areas of my lawn that are affected by this problem and not? Is there more sun or more water in this area? Is there less sun or less water in that area? Is it a different type of grass? Are there weeds in that area that aren't there? Those weeds that I see, are those weeds like dollar weed that typically grow in a wet condition? So these are the types of observations that you want to make. You're gathering all of this information. Our first idea is not to go and try to throw down a chemical all the time. I see that too often, where people see a brown spot, and depending who you are and what you read, what blog post you read last, you want to throw down an insecticide or a fungicide. That's just how it goes, right? Don't always do that, because that's the wrong kind of spraying and praying. That's not the kind of spraying and praying we look for. We want to gather as many facts as we can. Now, in a lot of cases, you're not going to come to a complete perfect answer, but if you've eliminated a lot of the guesswork out of it, you can come to a better conclusion. And as you continue to observe, some of this is like being doctors. Sometimes doctors will work with patients and they don't necessarily know what's wrong with them, or there could be multiple things wrong with someone. And so they're trying to eliminate certain things. That's why you can eliminate things out of your diet or whatever. It kind of works the same with the lawn. What do I need to do? What did I do here? What did I do there? Also look at your irrigation. For a lot of you, we're in the dry season right now, and some of your lawns just may not be getting watered properly. So the next thing I would do is I would tell you to, number one, is get your watering in line. And with St. Augustine grass, you want that to be deep and infrequent. And by the way, that's all grass types, deep and infrequent. We want to give St. Augustine grass, this time of year, it's the dry season right now, so you want to give it water at least twice a week, but possibly 3 times a week. You want to give it 1/2 inch of water in each particular irrigation cycle. I've talked about this before, putting tuna can on the front lawn in each zone, and see how long it takes that zone to fill that tuna can up to 1/2 inch, and that's how you know how long to leave that zone on. That's if you have an irrigation system. If you have to do it manually, which I did, I watered my lawn up north with manual impact sprinklers for years and enjoyed every single minute of it. No doubt I did. I loved it. But you can still do the same thing. You'll learn, if you're a manual waterer, you'll learn the areas of your lawn where you'll set your sprinkler. Like in my front lawn in Northwest Indiana, I basically had 3 spots where I would set it, and I knew I could cover the entire lawn with good overlap, and it would take me about 2 hours to do a watering cycle, so that's what I would do. And I had done that over time and I have videos on this on the channel where I used rain gauges and just knew. And then from there, it was just a matter of watering or monitoring. But definitely St. Augustine grass down here in the South right now, dry season, water, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Monday, Thursday, Sunday, whatever, or not like that. You know what I'm saying? Separate them by a day or 2 days and get that watering in there deep and infrequent. The other thing is, when in doubt, catch your clippings. Just when in doubt, do that. It's always a good thing if you think you might have some sort of disease present. Now, from there, let's talk about some possible causes of the brown spots other than lack of watering, or just how this just is coming out of dormancy in the spring, or maybe you spot sprayed some weeds and you got a little heavy-handed. I will tell you that no matter what weed control you use, it's going to affect St. Augustine grass. It just does. It's going to stunt it in some way. And so if you've spot sprayed, chances are maybe you just spot sprayed an area and it just stunted the St. Augustine there, but there's a dead weed in the middle of it. So again, St. Augustine's very sensitive. But if you think you have take-all patch, because that's the one that people will run to, quite often here in the spring because of the yellow grass blades. By the way, there's a lot of reasons why your St. Augustine grass can be yellow, and we're going to talk about that too. But if you think that it might be take-all patch, the first thing I want you to do then is get into the middle of the lawn there and grab one or two of those yellow blades of St. Augustine and just tug on it. Not hard, nice, easy, even pressure. If it pops right off, if it just comes right out, then you probably have rhizoctonia or brown patch. But if it hangs on, then that means it could possibly be the take-all patch, because take-all patch is a root problem. So if those blades are hanging on, those yellow blades, you're not yanking on them, but you're giving them nice even pressure, because if you have rhizoc, they'll come right out. And test this on a few. If they don't come out, the next thing you want to do is pull the stolons up and look at the roots themselves, and the roots will have that dark brown-black appearance. Go to a healthy part of your lawn and pull up some stolons and look at the roots. They're like a white, creamy white color. So if you're seeing that those grass blades are yellow, they're not pulling off easily, and the roots of the stolons are black, then you possibly could have take-all patch. If not, and you still have brown patches, then it could possibly be rhizoctonia. If it's not that, it might even be mole crickets, even though that's a little bit different of a problem and mostly coastal. If you think it could be that, then I'm going to tell you that, and I don't have time to do this on a podcast, I can't, but you can do a soap test, and I recommend that you Google soap test for mole crickets. Find one of the university extensions. The University of Florida has a pretty good article on it. A couple others do. And you go out and do a soap test, and you will be able to see the mole crickets, and then that's a whole nother thing we can go down. But those are some different tests that you can do to see if that is the problem or not. Now, if you do confirm, if you confirm that you have brown patch, the first thing you want to do, and again, that rhizoctonia brown patch would have been lingering from last fall, but as you guys know that have my ebook, if you don't have my ebook, my e-guide, you can go to thelawncarenut.com and get it. It's under lawn plans. We have a warm season and cool season guide. I talk about fungus, and I talk about periods of transitional weather. It's a good idea to go ahead and apply a preventative fungicide during periods of transition, and we are in that right now. You're going to have challenges or threats, not only from the rhizoctonia brown patch, and it seems from this take-all patch, but also from gray leaf spot coming up here on St. Augustine grass anyway. So to go ahead and put down the bulletproof strategy, which is going to be Scott's Disease X that you can get locally, and that's azoxystrobin is that active ingredient. It's the same thing as the very expensive Heritage G that you can get online, except you can get this locally, and it's going to be the same thing. Read the label and apply that. Now, that's a granular fungicide, so that needs to be watered in. That is not going to be the best approach for the take-all patch, but it will help. The reason it won't be the best approach for the take-all patch is because that product has to be taken in via the roots, and the roots in take-all patch are what are affected. But we're going to use that anyway as a blanket application because it's a different group or a different mode of action than our propiconazole, which is our second, or Eagle, but I'll talk about that in a second. But either way, you want to get that down, get that watered in. That is going to be a preventative for the rest of the lawn so that things don't necessarily spread. That's the idea there. And it will help any areas that are still there and have some life left in the roots, of course. But take-all patch is one of those that hangs up in the thatch layer. And so you're going to want to get a liquid fungicide down right on top of that, and that's what we call our bulletproof strategy. Now, I think Eagle, which is myclobutanil, Eagle fungicide will probably work a little better here, but propiconazole is fine too if you have that. You're going to use the heavier rates of either one of those. That's applied with a liquid, and you want to get that into the thatch zone and right at the top of the soil. So if you have one of those really thick, thatchy, spongy St. Augustine grass lawns, then you're going to want to water this in a little bit, not too much, but you want it to sit up in there in that surface area. The other thing then, after you do that, is if you do think that you have take-all patch, then I'm going to recommend some peat moss. Just go to the store. Any big box store will have these giant bricks of peat moss. It's like $9 for the biggest brick. Just rake a little bit of that in about a quarter to a half-inch thick of peat moss. Rake that into the areas where this is occurring, where this you assume this take-all patch is. That's because that's going to change the pH of the soil, and that is going to help the disease to stop. It's something about changing the pH, taking the pH down, which is what happens when you put the peat moss in there. It kind of causes this take-all patch disease to stop being active. That's a good thing because peat moss is good for your soil anyway. We're not putting enough in to change the overall alkalinity of the soil. That is not what we're doing, but it's enough to change it right at the surface layer, which is where this disease is at. So that's another thing that you can do, and that's very cheap and will not cost very much at all. The next thing is, though, Sometimes it's not a disease. Sometimes it's just the fact that your lawn is lacking iron or perhaps potassium. It can be other micronutrients that can cause a yellowing. So one of the other things that you want to do is just make sure you put down a balanced fertilizer. Now, you don't want to push too much nitrogen when there could be a possibility of disease, but it doesn't mean don't push any. The other thing you're going to want to do is, if you can, you would go liquid at this time if you think you have take-all patch, because the one thing about take-all is because those grass blades are not easily pulled off, that means they can still take in nutrients via foliar feed. Now, if you're using the 1801 Green Punch, that's a great application to make because it also has some potassium in it, as well as only a quarter pound of nitrogen, because we do it at like a 16 ounce per thousand. That's just John Perry's advice anyway, is to go low dose nitrogen. So an 1801 Green Punch would be good. If you have 700 Green Effect, that's a good way to put in some extra nitrogen without getting a big boost or a big blast. The other thing you would want to do is put down some microgreen. It's got all of the micros in it. Nice dose of microgreen across. Nice liquid. Go ahead and let that get in there. So those are some things too. When you come across a yellow lawn, sometimes it can just be a micronutrient deficiency or a nutrient deficiency in general. And if you don't have a soil test or you don't have the ability to get one, then it's okay to put down a nice light spoon feed of all of your micros and the macros. Just get that down. So another idea to do there that might help you get through it. In the end, though, whether you do anything or not, I don't want you to panic, because here's the thing. At some point, we need to realize that these grasses in the South, especially St. Augustine grass, they are alpha grasses, and they will take over space. I want you to think about something, and that is that my St. Augustine I showed in a video not long ago actually grew up over a 5-foot hedge inside of 8 months. Actually, about 9 months since I had trimmed that hedge, 8 or 9 months. And the stolons from the St. Augustine grass had grown up through it and over and were growing back down the other side of the bushes in 8 or 9 months. So imagine if you lost an area of your lawn that was, say, 10 by 10, and some St. Augustine was still in there. It's going to spread back. If it can take over an entire hedgerow in 8 or 9 months, it can spread 18 inches in a month and a half or 2 or 3, especially if you have some that lives, because it's not all going to die off typically if you're doing some other things. And we're going to talk about controlling the controllables here in a second. But the idea being, don't always think that everything has to be a chemical. Sometimes thinning of the lawn is good. If you have one of those St. Augustine grass lawns that is super just dense and spongy, I actually think that some of it dying back a little bit. I've even said sometimes starve it of water in the winter and let it thin out a little bit. Let it get lean. Let it go on a lean type of a diet for a while. I think that sometimes is good. I'm not saying to let large sections of the lawn die out, but if sections do and the strong survive, that's okay, especially with St. Augustine grass. The other thing is, don't be afraid to think about the way we work with warm season turf, especially St. Augustine, Bermuda, and Zoysia, and centipede if you can find plugs. But don't forget that we oftentimes work surgically rather than medicinally. You don't always have to put a chemical down. Sometimes all you got to do is go in, do some hard raking, and put in some fresh plugs, or drop a couple pieces of sod and surgically repair an area. Even though you might still have some sickness there, you got to cut out the infection as much as you can, patch it up with some fresh, and then use less of the chemical to control from there. Just one of those ideas. Don't forget to think surgically. Because our grasses spread so fast, and because they're alpha, and because they take over, sometimes it's good to just be surgical and just put in some fresh plugs, maybe in conjunction with some of these other strategies. The other thing is, no matter what you do, control the controllables. That means St. Augustine grass, mow tall, mow frequently, mow every couple days, catch the clippings if you think disease is present. Water deep and infrequent. These are things you can control. It's okay to fert, but not hard. Balance the nutrients. Those are all things you can control. Apply a fungicide if you need to. You can control that. Rake in some peat moss. You can control that. So control the things that you can. Hope for the best after that. That'll take care of that one. I know I rambled on quite a bit about that, but I hope that helps a lot of you guys with St. Augustine grass, just coming out of dormancy, coming into spring, and seeing these brown or yellow spots, and understanding some of the strategies and some of the things that you can do by process of elimination to try to help that recover or try to help that be good. Because I can tell you, once you get to Kentucky Derby Day, that's going to be pretty much all of you around the country. That's going to be your peak, and I bet you'll be looking just fine from there. With that, one of the things I wanted to talk about too this week is I see this quite often, and I need to try to back some of this down. I think some of you, I get you really fired up, and that's good, and I like getting you fired up, and I like you having a hard sense of urgency, but some of you, I think you stress out over the lawns, and I can't stand seeing that, especially in our Facebook group where you guys know We have so many people in there now. We're getting, well, now it's like 40 posts an hour sometimes. We cannot approve all 40 posts per hour in the Facebook group. It just won't work. But I have to delete some sometimes, right? It's just, I'm sorry about that. You guys don't take that personally. It's nothing against you. We're not doing that. It's just, I don't know how to scale it. So we're trying to figure that out. But until we do, we just can't put every post in. And I see sometimes you guys are panicked. You get a soil test back and it doesn't look that bad to me, but you think it is. And you're just panicked. Your lawn is going to die or whatever. And let me just tell you guys something. Realize this, grass grows on the side of the highway without anyone helping it. It ain't even mowed right. It's mowed with bush hogs. So your grass has been in your lawn. If your house is 10 years old, 20 years old, 40, 50 years old, the grass has been there all of that time. It's gonna be okay. So don't stress yourself out. I think some of you, what happens is some of you, maybe you get up and brag about all this new stuff you're learning and how awesome it's going to be, and you got somebody in your life that's telling you you're going to fail. And so what's happening is you use that as a motivation to kind of overcome that, right? Like, I guess what I'm saying is I know that a lot of you get made fun of by your significant other because of your lawn care nuttery, and I think that some of you use that as a motivation, and I'm going to put it in your face, and I'm going to get the lawn looking beautiful. Significant other, spouse, wife, husband, whatever. You're putting that in, you're using that as a motivation, and then when you see the lawn going brown, what you fear is that they're going to point that out, and they're going to be like, yeah, see all that lawn care stuff you're doing? So much for that, huh? So much for all that stuff you're learning. And I get it. That sucks, and we all have to face that because sometimes that's the only time my lawn gets noticed too. I've noticed that my lawn gets noticed when it's at the extremes. At its extreme beauty, like when it is really perfect, which is Kentucky Derby Day, as I keep mentioning for most of you. When it's perfect, it definitely gets noticed. And then when it's not so perfect, it gets noticed. Anytime in between, nobody really talks about it much. So I know that some of you fear that you're going to get that negative notice, but you got to just get through that. Don't let it stress you out. I can promise you the grass is going to come along. It just may not come along as fast as what your expectations are right now, but it's going to get better. With that, we do try to approve as many of those Facebook posts as we can. So I'm really sorry that we cannot get you all in Facebook. I keep mentioning this because I really think that in some cases it comes back negatively on us. You guys, not you guys, but people that may be new to the group, they think we don't like them because we can't approve their posts, and that's not it at all. So please help me spread that word that we're not trying to ignore people. But one of the things we did do is we started this call-in line for this exact reason, because I just think it's a little bit more interactive. It's another way for you guys to call in, and we've gotten a few calls here this week. If you do want to call in and ask your question, we might use it on the podcast. Please call us at 833-526-8477. That's 833-526-8477. And Ben, the Lawn Guardian, who runs that for me, he moderates it or whatever goes through. He wants me to remind you that that is a very creative number because it's actually 833-LCN-TIPS. 833-LCN-TIPS. If you do know how to use letters on your phone still, I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how to spell LCN-TIPS. That's why I just remember 833-526-8477 for all your lawn care answers. So our first question then, coming over the Lawn Care Nut Hotline, I don't know what we're going to call it. We'll figure it out. But our first one comes from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hey, Ellen. My name is Justin, giving you a call from Nashville, Tennessee. Just bought my first house actually a couple months ago, and it is in shambles. The house has been vacant for about 5 years, and if you've ever seen a yard with weeds, mine is it. So went ahead and put the crabgrass halts down last week. Really a big fan of the Mile Organic. I'd already done some research there, and after watching a lot of your YouTube videos, sounds like you're a big fan. I know that I need to wait at least 4 weeks after laying down that crabgrass halts to put any fertilizer on the yard. However, my question to you is, would you suggest doing some weed kill, some weed and feed by Scott's or whomever before putting down some fertilizer such as the Mile Organic, or would you go ahead and do that? So I appreciate your time. Love all the videos. Definitely a noob here, but looking to become knowledgeable here very soon. Thanks for your time, Alan.
All right, so this is a great one. Justin, first of all, bro, congratulations on your new home. I love it when you guys get a new home and you jump right onto the lawn. So awesome there. Nashville, Tennessee, beautiful area too. Okay, so let me break this down. The first thing is you mentioned halts. So I don't know if that's a generic term that you're using, Justin, for pre-emergent for crabgrass, or if you actually used the actual halts. And I think that's one of the things I want to bring out here right now. So halts is a term that the Scott's company uses. And when they say halts, what they mean is pre-emergent for crabgrass. They have a certain active ingredient that they use, and I guess they must have made a deal. I don't know why they only use this active ingredient, but they do, and it's called pendimethalin. So they only use pendimethalin, Scott's company does, in their products that contain a pre-emergent for crabgrass. So if you get Scott's, I don't know if it's step 1. I actually did a video about this over the weekend where I went to Wisconsin, and I was able to show you some Scott's fertilizer with halts in it. I don't know if they call it step 1 or not, but if that's what you're talking about, Justin, and you actually put that down, then definitely you need to wait at least 4 weeks, because the Scott's step with halts is actually a pre-emergent for crabgrass plus fertilizer included. That's why you'll see numbers on the bag 30-0-4. So that is a product that has herbicide in it to prevent crabgrass, and the active ingredient is pendimethalin, which Scott's calls halts, and it also has fertilizer. So it's all in one. That is not a bad way to go. If you're a beginner and that's all you know how to do, or you're not, I shouldn't say it that way. If you're a beginner and you're like, dude, I'm overwhelmed, but I know I need to get this done, then yes, go to the store and get that. It's 2.67 pounds per 1,000 square feet for that Scott's crabgrass preventer with halts. If you're on my email list, you got an email showing you pictures of it, because that's what I try to do, guys. I don't sell that stuff. I don't make any money on that, but I want you to understand how to think for yourself. I showed you the label on the product, how to read the label. All of that was in my email. Get that. It's 2.67 pounds per 1,000. The setting on your Scott's spreader is going to be like 3 for that, probably 3 or maybe coming up to 4. Measure your lawn out and apply that. What that'll do is it's going to give you 0.8 pounds per 1,000 of nitrogen. That's because you're putting it down at 2.67 pounds per 1,000, and it's a 30% nitrogen product. 30-0-4 is the analysis, NPK, 30% nitrogen. 2.67 pounds per 1,000 is the rate. Okay, again, and you can get that right off the bag. You can do some math. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And it's a 30% nitrogen product, which means 2.67 times 30% or 0.30 is 0.8. And 0.8 is the amount of nitrogen that will go down per 1,000. So just over 3/4 pound in. Now, I believe that's a little bit high, really, for any of you when it comes to early. And when I say that, it's a little bit high of synthetic. Now, there's some slow release in there, but I really like the Milorganite. It's funny, Justin pronounces it Milorganic, which I think is cool. Milorganite is what he's referring to, and I prefer to use that because that's going to put in some carbon in the soil. That's going to feed microbes, which is going to kick the microbes up as things come up quickly, and I like that all working together rather than a synthetic fertilizer that's just going to go in and take care of the plants. So I really want to feed the soil along with it. The other thing about Milorganite is it's going to be naturally slow released, because as the heat comes up, that's when the microbes break it down, so it releases as the lawn is waking up. It's a very natural process. That's why I prefer organic fertilizers. When you use the halts, though, that also has, or the Scott's halts, that also has the fertilizer in it, you cannot use the Milorganite now for at least 4 weeks. And I'm thinking that's where you're coming from there, because I want you to not fertilize that soon. I don't want you to put down more fertilizer that soon. So if you put the halts down that has 30% nitrogen in it, or is that a 30-0-4 analysis, if you put that down at 2.67 pounds per 1,000 right now, you're going to be good for crabgrass for 3 or 4 months. You're also going to be good with fertilizer for 4 weeks. I hope that makes sense. So that's the first part to break down there. Now, let's pretend that you're using the word halts as a generic word for pre-emergent. And what you're really asking me, Alan, is I'm going to put my pre-emergent down right now, or I put my pre-emergent down already. Do I need to wait to fertilize? So if you put down your pre-emergent that is like I sell, which is prodiamine, which is a 007, and the 7 in there is just a little bit of potash that's actually used as a carrier for the prodiamine. So it doesn't have much fertilizer value. So we don't consider it a fertilizer, even though it says that on the bag. It'll say fertilizer plus herbicide. We don't care about the fertilizer. The 007 doesn't mean anything. It's the prodiamine in the bag. If you are putting prodiamine down, which is another pre-emergent, I think it's a little bit better than pendimethalin as far as I'm concerned. It's just going to stick in the soil a little bit better. I also believe it lasts longer for sure, which is part of that sticking in the soil. It's also not as messy and it doesn't stain. But again, if you have a choice, go with the prodiamine. You also then can get that prodiamine essentially by itself without ride-along fertilizer, and that offers you flexibility. Now you can apply the prodiamine now, which is what I tell you to do as soil temperatures are approaching 55 degrees. We already talked about that. You put down 3 pounds per thousand, and then again, as soil temperatures are approaching 70 degrees, which is going to be about 40 or 45 days later, you put down another application of prodiamine, and that's going to be at also 3 pounds per thousand. If you do that, doesn't matter, cool season, warm season, 55 and 70 are your temperature milestones, and you want to get those apps down leading up to that. If you do that, now you have ultimate flexibility with the rest, which is your fertilizer. So you could choose then to use Milorganite or starter fertilizer, which we'll talk about, or Ringer Lawn Restore, or whatever else you want to find out there to put down, 1801 Green Punch. Whatever you want to use, you can apply. By the way, don't apply liquids if there's a chance for a freeze. But other than that, you can choose your fertilizer. So that's why I recommend a separated pre-emergent, separated from fertilizer. Now, the other question he asks is, does he have to wait to kill weeds? Because he's got a neglected lawn, he's got his pre-emergent handled, from whatever I just told him, Justin's going to figure out how he's going to do his pre-emergent. But now he says, can I go out and attack weeds? And this is a question I get a lot. Do I have to wait? And the answer is no. You can go out and spray weeds in the lawn anytime you want. It's not going to affect your pre-emergent. Spraying weeds doesn't affect fungicides. It doesn't affect insecticides. It doesn't affect fertilizing. It's like a separate thing. Now, we tend to do things on the same day. Obviously, if Saturday is here and you have your equipment all out and you're going to be spreading fertilizer and you're going to be spreading some, pre-emergent, it only makes sense that since you're doing all this stuff in the lawn, you would spray weeds too. Yeah, that's fine. You can do them all together, or you can do them all separate. You could put your pre-emergent down on Saturday, water it in, put your Milorganite down on Monday. You don't have to water that in, just let it sit, and you can go spray weeds on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I don't care. Now, don't spray the same weeds over and over, but the idea being, think of these things as all separate. They don't interfere with one another. There are some things that can do that, but all the stuff I recommend in the book pretty much is going to play nicely together. You can apply things for the most part around together. The only things you have to really be concerned about is with cool season grasses when you're using grass seed. That's when you have to be careful, and then you're using weed controls in conjunction with the grass seed. But other than that, feel free, Justin, to spray weeds anytime you want. And if you have a really bad problem, like what it seems you do, you may want to use one of the hose-in sprayer options. Just get a couple of those. If you have 5,000 square feet, you get one that covers 5,000 square feet. You go out there and spray the whole lawn down, and you're good, and you're done. That's going to be a quick way to get a nice blanket application of weed control down on the lawn if you need to. So I hope that answered the question. I know that one kind of came across. I made some assumptions, but I do that because I like to take you guys down different trails because, again, I get a lot of the same question. I think sometimes I learn from the language that you use that you might think of something in a different way than I do. And so that's why I wanted to bring up the idea of Halts being kind of a generic name, but also kind of being a brand name that Scotts uses. So with that, I really hope that helped you out there, my friend Justin. And again, congratulations on that new home. I hope you have a great season, my friend. Okay, now our next one goes back up. I guess for some reason I got a lot of love for Pennsylvania this week. This one is coming from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Hey there, Alan. My name is Tim from just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're still about 3 or 4 weeks from our lawn coming out of dormancy. But my question is, when is the best time to be raking or dethatching the lawn at this point? Is it okay to do that now, or should I wait until the lawn has come back to life here? Also, I would think that it's probably best to rake or dethatch prior to putting down my pre-emergent or fertilizing. I'd appreciate your feedback. Thanks so much, Alan, and see you in the lawn.
Tim, that was a good one, man. You should call in every week. That was super smooth. Great questions, though. So here's the deal. This goes right back to those of you all that have seen your lawn for the first time in the last couple weeks. The one thing that you definitely can get out and do is get out, besides removing leaves, is get out and do some raking. Create airflow. If you have, we talked about last week, field mice or vole damage, rake that out. It'll come back fine. If you have snow mold that you're seeing, rake it out, create airflow. Get your blower out, blow those areas. Any areas that are matted down where snow was that seem slimy or gooey, get some airflow in there. Do some light raking. If you have areas that are even worse and if things are pulling out, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I have never dethatched a lawn mechanically, ever. In all of the years that I've worked on lawns, cool season mostly, I have never dethatched a lawn, ever. Everything I've ever done was able to be controlled either through heavy aeration, punching tons of holes through it, or by hand raking. Hand raking will do a lot for you, and that's really what I recommend for most of you. I just don't see massive thatch problems too often. If you do have one and you do need to do a power rake, go ahead and do that in the spring before you put your pre-emergent down for sure. But definitely hand raking, same thing. Now you can hand rake after you do pre-emergent lightly. If you have some areas in the lawn that don't green up, maybe say you're getting into late April and you live in Pittsburgh and things are not greening up, you can hand rake those areas even after your pre-emergent. But for sure, Tim, very smart. Do all your raking now before that pre-emergent barrier gets down there and gets watered in, because that is then when you don't want to disturb things. You're going to have to walk on it to mow it. I get it that you're going to have some kind of traffic on the lawn throughout the year, but hardcore raking definitely don't want to do after you put your prodiamine down. So there you go. There's my tips on that one. And again, the biggest thing you want to look for, Tim, is airflow. Okay, our next one comes in from Cincinnati, Ohio. Spent quite a few days in Middletown, Ohio at an old bar called the Grand Illusion. Anybody remember that one?
Alan, this is Bert in Cincinnati. Just wondering if you're still recommending a starter fertilizer in the spring along with a dose of Milo. Thanks again, brother.
What's up, Bert? So listen, this is a great question. It's one I get a lot, and it's one I definitely need to address. So you guys know that in my original ebook, I would talk about starter fert fixes everything. Start the year off with starter fert. Well, I still believe that, and that's still true in a way, but a couple things happened, and that was that I ended up getting so many hundreds of questions throughout the year about what starter fert was, because it's a generic term. There isn't an actual thing that you could call starter fertilizer. Now, I know you'll find that there are some brands that will call something a starter fertilizer, of course, but what we mean when we say starter fertilizer is to find a macro fertilizer that contains N, P, and K in near equal values, or at least has some of each of those. The problem with that was, like, I might have found when I was going to my local store, I might have found something that was like a 2108, I don't know, or a 21010, or a 10, or a 151015. What I'm saying is, what I find and put in the book is different than what you guys can find. And because of the nature of how complicated I tend to make things, people get completely confused. If they can't find, this is not all of y'all, but this is a lot of people, if they can't find the exact same product that I'm using in the book, they're lost. And so learning NP and K and calculating nitrogen, you guys see I try to teach that, and I continue to teach it, and I'm not going to give up because you need to understand it. So when I throw at you to get starter fert and you're like brand new and it's your first app of the year, it was a non-starter for a lot of people. So that's why I just went and said, look, just throw down Milo, do it this way. Now, with that, if you have a soil test, and in my books I talk about it, hey, if you want to go another step and you feel like you're comfortable, get a soil test. If you have a soil test that says that you have a phosphorus and a potassium deficiency, or that you need it, then go ahead. I don't really care what your nitrogen says. You're always going to throw nitrogen down. You're going to throw it down at 1/2 to 3/4 pounds of nitrogen per thousand. Period. The other thing is that I think in the original book, I had you guys throwing down like 1.5 pounds of nitrogen, like out the gates. I think that's a little bit heavy. You know, I've been trying to knock some of that down a little bit, trying to back off of that a little bit. So that's part of it too. I just don't think all of that is needed. But again, if you have a soil test that tells you have those deficiencies, then go get some starter fert and put it down and try to find one that matches what your needs are. You can find a 10-10-10 nowadays just about anywhere, and that's fine too, because then you can really dial that up. Put that down at 1/2 pound, per thousand, and you'll get 1/2 pound of NPK. That's a fine way to start. My big thing is I just don't want you going too crazy, and I didn't want to confuse the beginners. So that's why I tell everybody, just start with the Milo. It's going to come up naturally. It's going to come up slowly, and you're going to get a nice screen up, and everything is going to be good. You're not going to push too much. So that's it. If you want to use starter fertilizer, if you know what that means, which you understand how to dial things in, that's good. And that's where we get into soil tests, because I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, and that being, if you have a soil test that shows you're deficient in certain nutrients, you don't need to worry about fixing all of that in one app. It's directional. If you're low in iron, then that means over the next, 6 months, just make sure that your applications have micro doses of iron. It's a micronutrient. You don't have to throw down massive amounts of it right now. But if you have a micronutrient deficiency of iron and you're using Milorganite, then you can just call it good. You know you're good because there's iron in Milorganite. Or maybe you have a manganese deficiency. Well, that's okay because you have the OO2 microgreen, so you're dosing that in. And if you follow my plans, we microdose that in, or we spoon feed those things in. Just hit the smorgasbord. Think of it like a balanced diet. You eat some carbs, you eat some vegetables, you have some protein in there, you can get some sugar every once in a while, and that's okay. You got to have, the right balance of it's the same thing. It's not like you're trying to eat today to be full for a week. You have to eat every single day, and that's how the lawn is. So your soil test just shows you, like a blood test, it shows you where you're deficient and what kind of marks you need to go for, and then you can retest in 12 months and see how you ended up. All right, now this next one we're going to go down, this is somebody that got newer sod in Texas.
Hey, Alan, this is Gray in Austin, Texas. I'm moving to a new home that has fresh sod laid down that's been there, for a few months, so it's getting rainwater, but not much water. I'm just wondering, what are the first steps I should take with that brand new lawn? Bermuda, by the way.
Well, Gray, first of all, bro, congratulations on your new home. That is awesome. And again, I always say I love that when you guys are coming right in looking for lawn care. So the first thing I would do with new sod like this, again, so I'm assuming it was, I don't know when it was put down, but sometime in the winter, you say it's been out there getting water. So the first thing I would do is go and pull it up and just make sure it's rooted. It should be, I'm sure it is, but if it's not, then definitely you're going to want to put down some sort of a root growth stimulant, something that's going to stimulate rooting. We have the RGS from Greene County, but you can get whatever you like. But that's the first thing I do. But I'm going to assume it's rooted. So once you understand that it's rooted, then the first thing I want you to do is get your mowing in line. Go ahead and get out there and get ready. Now, I don't know where you're at. You're in Austin. It should be fairly warm now, so it should be starting to grow. Make sure you get that mowing in line. The other thing I would do is set my irrigation up immediately. Make sure that, I'm not sure what the weather in Austin is this time of year, but get your irrigation in line. Even if you do have roots and it has rooted properly, it's still not going to be fully established as it will be, 3 or 4 years from now. So you want to make sure that when you water, you're watering deep and infrequent. We've talked about that. Same with Bermuda. It's going to need 1 inch to 1.5 inches a week, depending how hot it gets. And you want those spaced out, and you want to give it a 1/2 inch to each time. Let that water soak deep. That's the second thing. The next thing I would want you to do is go ahead and fertilize like normal. Again, I'm assuming it's rooted and that you're able to have cut it at least once or twice. In other words, it's been in the ground and rooted for at least 30 days or so. If that's the case, go ahead and fert like normal. Push it nice and slow. Of course, I like Milorganite. You can find probably Sunnyland All Natural. Whatever you want to do, just find something that's going to get some carbon in the soil and that's going to stimulate microbes. Of course, biostimulants are good. Humic 12 we have. Anything like that that's got humic acid in it, that's going to help stimulate the soil and, again, just feed those roots a little bit better. And then the next thing I recommend, again, assuming you're rooted and that sod has been in, now you're going to want to read the label on the pre-emergent that you get, but if you've done at least 2 mowings, then you can go ahead and throw down your pre-emergent, which we have as prodiamine. I would recommend you get that down right away because you don't want crabgrass invading or whatever else might be in there. So other than that, there isn't anything superbly outstanding that you need to do right now, except the basic maintenance, control the controllables, and just stay on top of it and see what it looks like. Now, as things go along, that's when you might have to reassess. But for right now, I think you just take charge of the basics. You just get in there and you start working with it right away. You've got it brand new, so you have a chance to really help it get going. And I really think that the mowing is going to be the most important thing for that new sod. The more you mow, the healthier it's going to grow, the more rhizomes and stolons it's going to shoot out, and the more roots. All right, now our last one, we're going to finish up today in St. Augustine, Florida.
Hey, Alan. Thanks for everything you do. My name is Ronald. I live in St. Augustine, Florida, and I have St. Augustine grass type. I was wondering, when I do aeration, mechanical, can I do a triple or quadruple pass without hurting the lawn too much? Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
Hey, Ronald, this is a great question, and it's one I get a lot. And here's what I'm going to tell you. In Florida, our soil is sandy enough, even in the most highly dense clay-based parts of Florida. I do not recommend you aeration. In fact, for most of you with St. Augustine grass, I do not recommend aeration. That's because our grasses are strong. They're alpha. They can break through the ground. They can get in. In Florida, we have super sandy soil for the most part, so there's no need to aerate, because the reason you would mechanically aerate in this case would be to create surface area in the soil to allow for more rooting. You don't need that in a sandy-based soil. So if you live in Florida and you have sandy soil, even if you have the most dense clay in Florida and you have St. Augustine grass, I do not recommend you mechanically aerate at all. If you want to use our Aerate product, which is a liquid aeration product, unlike others that are surfactants and all that, ours is an actual chemical that goes into the soil and breaks bonds. And then it pulls humic acid along with it, which is a carbon source that sticks. So the aerate breaks down through, and then the carbon is deposited and left behind and stuck in the soil. So in sandy soils, it actually adds to the carbon in the soil. In your clay soils, it actually breaks things apart because clay is so dense, and it actually breaks that apart and creates space and then shoves that carbon in there. So liquid aeration would be fine for you, Ronald, but definitely don't need to do any mechanical aeration at all. I don't even know if St. Augustine grass would work very well with an aeration. If you tried, I would think the stolons would get all ripped apart and ripped up from the tines themselves. So someone else can try to correct me on that, but I'm telling you right now, as a general rule, do not aerate in Florida, do not aerate sandy soil at all, and definitely don't aerate St. Augustine grass. So kind of a different way to end up the week there, but hopefully you guys got something out of this. And, you know, overall this week and overall coming into the spring, my main goal for you all is to be observant. Don't always think that you have to throw a chemical at something. Don't always think that a brown spot on the lawn is bad. Don't always think that everything has to be perfect. We're in a marathon here. You're going to be living at your house, hopefully 25, 35, 45 years. Hopefully your grandkids will come and play on that same lawn. You have that long to get this thing dialed in. Now, it's not going to take you that long, but if this is your first year or your second year and something comes along, just realize this is how it works. This is the relationship you have with your lawn. This is what you learn. And as long as you're observant and you do things better and better every year and you control the controllables, I promise you'll have a nice lawn. So with that, I hope that everyone has a great week. I hope that it's warm where you are and that the sun is shining on your face and that soon you'll be able to enjoy the mow. I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the lawn.
Hi, Alan. This is the Lawn Rebel. I have Kentucky bluegrass, and I live in the cool season zone in Utah. I have two questions for you. One, if I put sand down on my lawn, will this turn my lawn into concrete? And two, when will you be coming to my house to mow my lawn? Thanks, Alan. Appreciate the show.